Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to find the equation of a linear graph. There are two main ways in which the question will ask you to do this. It will either be with an equation or it will be with a graph that you then have to find the equation for. So, first of all we need to understand the main layout of a straight line, linear graph. So generally they're in the format y equals mx plus c, where m is the gradient of the line, and the gradient is basically how steep it is. So that tells us if it looks like that would be a positive gradient. Something like this is a negative gradient. You might have something that's slightly shallower, which means I've got the gradient of this is slightly smaller than the gradient of this, for example. So this is a positive gradient and this is a negative. So just to make sure, negative, just to make sure that you are happy with the direction in which it's going. The plus c bit on the end, or the number that's on its own, is called the y-intercept. And that is where it crosses, where the graph crosses the y-axis. So we've got x and y here. If I've got the equation here, this is going to be my y-intercept. It's the point where it crosses the y-axis. So the way to know this is the gradient is always the number that is with the x. The y-intercept is the number that is on its own. To have the equation of a linear graph, it needs to be in this format of y equals mx plus c. We don't want to be seeing numbers and coefficients of y, we just want it y equals. So if there is ever a number in front of the y, we'll need to rearrange it and get that into this format. So looking at some examples then, just being able to read gradients and y-intercepts from equations that we've given. So the first one, the gradient is 7. And the y-intercept is -5. Number 2, my gradient, as I mentioned earlier, the gradient is always what's with the x. So the gradient here is actually -1/3. My y-intercept is the number that's on its own. So that's 9. So just watch out. It doesn't have to be in the order mx plus c. It can be c plus mx. Now I appreciate that this isn't a plus and this isn't a plus. It doesn't matter. It can be negative. We can have a negative value. So just watch out for that. Obviously the gradient is the value that's with the x, or the coefficient of x, not forgetting the sign. And the y-intercept is the value on its own. Number 3. My gradient, now here it looks like there is no number there, but actually we've got a number 1. So the gradient here is 1. The y-intercept, number on its own, is 4. Now with the last one, you'll notice that it's not in the form y equals, it's 2y equals. And so what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to divide everything, and that includes the 5x and the -4 by 2. So that then leaves me with 2y divided by 2 is y. 5x divided by 2 leaves me with 5 over 2x. And -4 divided by 2 is -2. I can now really clearly see I've got it in the format y equals mx plus c. And I can take from that my gradient is 5 over 2. And my y-intercept is -2 because it's the number on its own there. So looking at that from a graph, here I have got the equation, or the graph of a line that has been labelled A. Now hopefully we're all happy that the y-intercept here is 2. So I would just make a note of that. Y-intercept is 2 because it's crossing the y-axis at 2. I now need to find the gradient. Now you will need to remember this formula. The gradient is the change in y over the change in x. Another way that we can look at this is change in y is the difference between two y coordinates that we're going to choose. I'm going to show you that in just a second. So we do our first y value that we find minus our second y value over our first x value minus our second x value. So we've got y1, first one, minus y2, second one, over x1, first x value, minus x2, our second x value. So what I'm going to do for this purpose of this question, I am going to pick two coordinates. So I'm going to pick 2, 5. So I've got 2, 5, and I have got, what should we go for? Let's go for minus 4, minus 4. So, what I'm going to do to find the gradient, I've got the two coordinates. It doesn't matter which one's y1 and which one's y2. I'm going to just go with this. So I'm just going to label x1 and y1, x2 and y2. This is my first coordinate, which is why it's x1 and y1. This is my second coordinate, so x2 and y2. It doesn't matter if they're the other way round, you will still get exactly the same answer in the end. So y1 is 5, minus y2, which is minus 4. So 5 take away negative 4, and then x1 is 2, and my x2 value is minus 4 again, so take away negative 4. Remember, when I take away a negative, that means I'm going to have to add them actually, so I end up with that. So 5 plus 4 is 9, 2 plus 4 is 6. This is the gradient. Now what I can do is I can just simplify that and say that's 3 over 2. To get 3 over 2, I've just divided this by 3 and this by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3, 6 divided by 3 is 2. So the equation of this line is y equals my gradient of 3 over 2, x, and my y-intercept that I worked out earlier, which is 2. The equation of this line is y equals 3 over 2x plus 2. Okay. Find the gradient of the line that joins minus 3, 8 and 5, 4. So, x1, y1, x2, y2. Gradient. Remember the formula that we've just used. y1, which is 8, minus y2, which is 4. So y1 minus y2 over x1, which is minus 3, minus x2, which is 5. 8 minus 4 is 4. Minus 3 minus 5 is minus 8. And I'm just going to simplify this. They both divide by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. Minus 8 divided by 4 is minus 2. So the gradient that joins this for these 2 points is minus a half. Okay. So what we're going to look at next is perpendicular and parallel lines. So parallel lines have the same gradient. So this line and this line are parallel. Obviously I haven't drawn them with a ruler, so they're not exactly correct. But let's say that they are parallel, they would both have the same gradient. Perpendicular lines meet at 90 degrees and they have negative reciprocal gradients of each other. So what that means then is if I've got a line here that looks like that, the other line will cross it at 90 degrees. So let's say that this line has a gradient of 5. The gradient of this line is the negative reciprocal of 5. So the negative reciprocal of 5 is going to be minus, because it's the negative, reciprocal means 1 over. So negative reciprocal is minus 1/5. Just to do a couple on negative reciprocals. So if I have got 1/3, the negative reciprocal, I'm just going to do this in shorthand just to sort of save time. Negative reciprocal is going to be negative. Reciprocal means I flip it, 1 over, so I get negative 3. If I have minus 2, the negative reciprocal is going to be the negative of a negative, which is positive, reciprocal, which means 1 over. So if I've got minus 2, the negative reciprocal is 1/2. If I've got 4/7, the negative reciprocal is going to be, that's positive, so the negative of that is going to be negative. Reciprocal means I'm going to flip it, so I end up with 7/4. Another way to understand negative reciprocals is the product of these two numbers when they are multiplied, is what I mean by that. The product of those, or when they are multiplied together, it always equals to -1. If I did 1/3 times -3, I would get -1. -2 times 1/2 gets me -1. It's another way to remember it. My next question is find the equation of the line that is parallel to the line y equals 7x plus 5, and the line passes through 1 minus 3. So what I need to do is I need to identify that I'm looking for a line parallel to this line. So the gradient for this line is 7. So the gradient for my parallel line is going to be 7. So I know the format of the equation for my new line that I'm looking for is going to be y equals 7x plus c, and it needs to pass through the point 1 minus 3. So I will always write out the key bits of information before I start to do this. So just to remind you, I've got my gradient because it's parallel to this line. So my gradient of this line is 7. Parallel lines have the same gradient, so my gradient of my new line is going to be 7. And I know it has to go through the point 1 minus 3. I'm now going to substitute in my x and y values into the equation that I've sort of started here to find my value of c. So my y value is minus 3. I then have got my gradient of 7, which I need to multiply by my x value, which is 1, plus c. So I get minus 3 is equal to 7 plus c. Find the value of c, I need to subtract 7 from both sides. So I end up with minus 10 is equal to c. So the equation of the line that I'm asked for in the question is y equals 7x minus 10, and that is my final answer. Okay, next question. Find the equation of the line that is perpendicular to the line with the equation y equals 3x plus 5 through the point 9, 2. So the gradient of this equation is 3. So the perpendicular gradient is the negative reciprocal of 3. So the negative reciprocal of 3 is minus 1 over 3, so negative 1/3. So the equation of this line is going to be y equals minus 1/3 x plus c through the point 9, 2. So now what I need to do to find the equation of this, I need to find the value of c. So I'm going to substitute this in. My y value is 2. So 2 is equal to minus 1/3 times by my x value, which is 9, plus c. Therefore 2 is equal to minus the third times 9 gets me minus 3 plus c. And now to rearrange to find the value of c, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I get 5 is equal to c. So the equation of my line is y equals minus 1/3 x. This is a positive 5. So I get plus 5. And that's my final answer there. Okay, last question that I have for you. Find the equation of the line that joins 5, 2 and 7, 6. So to join these two lines, I need to work out the gradient. Now from the beginning of this video, hopefully you remember y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So I'm just going to label these to help you. x1, y1, x2, y2. So the gradient of this line is y1 minus y2. So 2 minus 6. Again, it doesn't matter if you want to label them round the other way round. If you want to call this one x2 and y2, because these are bigger numbers, so you want to start with those to then subtract the smaller numbers, that's absolutely fine, as long as they both have the same little number here, like x1, y1 or x2, y2. That's absolutely fine, it doesn't matter. Over x1, which is 5, minus x2, which is 7. So 2 minus 6 is minus 4. 5 minus 7 is minus 2. Minus 4 divided by minus 2 gets me a positive value of 2. Negative divided by negative gets me a positive result. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So now what I've got is y equals 2x plus c. Well, that's great. I now need to work out the value of c. If the line in the question is joining these 2 points, surely this line goes through one of those points, and therefore I can use either of these coordinates. It doesn't matter which one. I can use either of those coordinates to substitute into here to find the equation in full. So I'm just going to pick this one because it's got slightly smaller numbers. It's down to personal preference. If there's one that's got slightly nicer numbers or less negatives, then I would probably aim to use those ones. But I'm going to use this one because it's got slightly smaller numbers. Try it with that one and you will get exactly the same answer. So I need to write here through 5, 2, because that's the coordinate that I've chosen to do it through. Substitute the values in, so obviously my x and my y value, so 2 is equal to 2 from my gradient times my x value of 5 plus c, so 2 is equal to 10 plus c minus 10 from both sides, so I get negative 8 is equal to c, so the equation of this line is y equals 2x minus 8. Now, this is a very, very quick video. There are a huge variety of different questions that you can get on this topic, but I hope that the examples that I've done with you here will give you a good insight as to a number of the different sort of styles of questions that there are. So, yeah, thank you.